Hello, I'm Robin Bresnark, the Brand and Creative Director at Buyapowa. Welcome to Referral Marketing MVPs, where it's my privilege to speak to some of the people at the coalface of referral marketing, the real people who make it happen. Over the course of this series, we're going to speak to lots of different people, lots of different brands. We'll ask them how they got into referral, why they chose it, what they've learned, what mistakes they've made, where they see referral going in the future. It's great fun. We've had some incredibly interesting and insightful chats with people. I think you're going to really enjoy it. So, particularly if you're thinking of trying referral for the first time, or maybe you've been doing it for a while, but you've kind of hit a plateau, this is masterclass stuff. Sit back, enjoy, and stay tuned to our channel, where there'll be more of these over the coming weeks and months.
So I'm Michael Goodbody. So I'm the former VP of Marketing and Comms at Robinhood, former CMO at Dave. I was at Wise for a while as director of their North American Comms and Marketing, and spent about 5 years at Credit Karma as a VP of Marketing. So about 10 years of fintech marketing experience over in the US, and then before that was I'm originally from London, went to the University of Warwick. We just chatted about it, but I'm not really from London, I'm from Croydon. Big Crystal Palace fan, big Denver Broncos fan.
So we were going to talk mainly, I think, about Robinhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, well, for various reasons. I've had other people talk to me and cite it. It's a landmark referral example.
Yeah.
It's just massively celebrated. Like, people always cite, your Dropboxes and Ubers and those kinds of brands for kind of being like the forefathers of like modern digital referral programs. But then I think everything stayed largely the same for a long time and nothing really changed.
Yeah.
And then people like you came along and just transformed the referral game. So had you had much of experience of referral before that time? I know Wise, where you were previously.
That's probably where I cut my teeth on referrals. So I think I was at Wise 2015, 2016, 2017, so like pretty early on.
Yeah.
And helped to sort of launch them in North America. And, I think that was really where I saw the power, like firsthand, so like the power of referrals as a growth channel for marketing. And kind of like you, it's been an interesting journey. Like every company I've been at, there are a few sort of gold standard programs. I actually think Wise is up there. Like if you look at the programs that exist in the space, but I think Robinhood was always the one that when I was at competitors for a few years, we'd always be looking at trying to figure out like, okay, well, why is that so successful? So it was helpful. Right. It was kind of useful when we got here. It was a little bit like I don't know. When I sort of worked there, to be able to kind of go in and really dig into it and sort of take it part of it and understand some of the dynamics of it and how it's built. I'd always looked at it from outside and sort of seen it as sort of the gold standard as well. And I think it's a super interesting program.
So when he kind of took it as a gold standard and did some things, what kind of lessons had you already learned from Robinhood before you ended up there yourself? What kind of things that they did you try and do elsewhere?
Well, I think there are two or three like lessons that you can take from how successful that was, and I think from companies that sort of still managed to sort of drive growth through referrals. I think that as a as a channel, I do think that referrals, I have a bit more of a macro view, right? So I've worked at companies and in an industry where referrals are super important. But at Robinhood, I left very recently, but I was responsible for sort of every dollar spent. And so, you look at it within that marketing mix. And I think one of the things that's interesting about referrals is that it's become a much harder place. I mean, it's probably true of all marketing, to be honest with you, over the last 10 years, but it's been a much harder place to play in simply because, you're competing for share of voice. Like everyone kind of cottoned on to how much growth was coming from referrals from, in the mid tens, whatever we want to call it, and built their own programs. And so, now the consumer is really being kind of bombarded with requests to refer services, in a way that I don't think they were back when, like, I was at Wise or and looking at what Robinhood was doing. It was more of kind of like, well, that's an interesting way. That's interesting. Like, this company's like offering me some money to like talk about it. That's great. I love the company. I think now it's like, I probably get 2 or 3 of these requests a day, and you have to kind of be, and so you're a lot like the sort of the like the threshold, like the bar you have to get over in order to get somebody to invite us a little higher. Because I think there's also fatigue on the other end. Like, people are being invited to stuff by friends all the time, and you have to cut through that. So I think part of, when you look at how successful Robinhood was early on, a lot of that is that lack of competition, right? So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's the only thing. I think they definitely did some really important things that were different and sort of supercharged it. But generally, like, that lack of competition is something you have to bear in mind when you're thinking about it. So I think that's part one. But really, I think what they nailed. I'll come on to the differentiation of what they nailed later. I think the other part of it is it's an incredible product, right? And I think that's something that you have to, at the end of the day, referrals only work.
Yeah.
I think the way that you think about referrals, for the most part, if you want it to be affordable and economical and, like, a good part of your marketing mix, is like, you have to have an incredible product that people want to talk about. And then you're just giving them like a little bit more incentive to tell their friends and family about it. Like, I actually, before I joined Wise, I used to use Wise. I lived in Hong Kong. I was moving backwards and forwards between Hong Kong and Switzerland. I used it a lot, and I would tell people about it a fair amount. I'd want to tell people about it anyway, because it was a really useful product that I was using. And so when they then sort of presented me with the referral offer, or you present people with a referral offer, it's a way of being like, hey, I like this product. I want to tell my friends. There's a bunch of people I know that they use the product, that could benefit from the product, and if I do it now, I'll benefit. Maybe I'll get some money out of it. So I think that making sure that you understand that, like, your product in and of itself is something that people want to recommend. I think that's a really important part of it, because if you don't have that, you're gonna have the cost of getting somebody to make the recommendation, like, goes exponentially higher, right? It just becomes a financial transaction. So I think those two things for Robinhood, it's an incredible product. It always was. I think one of the reasons I joined was just like I'd used it for like 7 or 8 years, loved how it looked, loved how it felt, like, loved how slick it was. So I think you sort of have those two things going for you in those early days. But I think they really understood one thing that, to me, is at the very core of all successful referral mechanisms, which is that the best way of, like, getting people to see the financial benefit from a referral program is to, the way I talk about it is kind of, it's to take every dollar that you're putting into the program and perceptually, like, make that as valuable as possible to the consumer. And what I mean by that is, you can give someone $10, right? To recommend a product, and that's great. Like, people, whatever, it's a coffee. I think the more that you can do to make and every single one of those $10 potentially more valuable, it really helps in terms of how you can get that sort of scale out of the program. And in Robinhood's case, the way they did it was they sort of said, hey, get a free stock.
Yeah.
And a free stock, is that's a variable reward. And so in some cases they would give out, and again, I wasn't there at the time, so I'm trying to remember exactly what the offering was. But generally it was like, you might get a stock of Ford or Apple, or you might get a stock of Tesla. Some of these things are worth like $500, $600, $700, or you might get a stock of smaller companies maybe worth $5, right? And so they were able to take an average cost of, I think it was in the region of $5 to $10 of reward, and like turn that into a perceived cost from the consumer. They're like, well, I might get an Apple, I might get a stock of Apple, right, which is $500, and they were able to like create that, from a $10 cost. They were probably able, I'm sure not everyone was sitting there being like, well, I'm going to get $500, but they certainly, like, the idea that they could get a lot more than $10 was a really important part of it. So I think that idea of like the variable reward thing is really interesting, and I think that's what they, when I've been at other companies that were looking at what they were doing, that was what we learned from when we tried to implement. Like people that the guarantee of getting $10 versus the potential to get 1,000, like it's much more powerful for
Yep.
for the guarantee of getting 10 and the potential of getting 1,000, right? Like that's just the way that the human mind works.
Yeah, there are multiple things that they do which are absolutely best practice in that regard. So straight away, it's earn up to $1,500,
Yeah, right,
worth of stocks, right? Because that's the most that you can get per year.
right,
So again, you're selling like the ultimate goal, not the steps to get there,
right.
right? Which is really, really, smart. The other really smart thing there is that they're giving stocks away. And it's in your interest not to sell those stocks straight away, right? It's in your interest to keep hold of them, see if they grow, maybe buy a few more. So it actually, I think the real genius there is you're actually onboarding the user into the product with the reward as well. It may be the first stock they've ever owned.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is
No, I think the sort of the ability to like weave it into the core product and like what the product offers is it is interesting and certainly super smart and gives someone a head start and gives someone a taste for investing, which is something that obviously like Robinhood early on, that was a big part of what they were looking to drive, right?
yeah, I mean, there was something kind of beautiful about the idea of it. I think it was inspired almost by the kind of the Wall Street protests and the idea of democratizing these things. So to be able to do a little bit of that with the rewards as well, actually put some stocks into the hands of people that could perhaps never have even dreamed of getting them, is there's something kind of beautiful about that.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
is, and I think it goes back to like in principle, I think we're taught to believe that an investment has the potential to you know be worth more than the original, that kind of original like amount of money. And so again, you're not just giving somebody the opportunity of $10, you're giving them the opportunity of you know at least $10, right? $10 plus. And I think it's that power of the referral mechanism that really like helped to drive that. Certainly I do think at the time, like if you look at stock ownership in the US and like the percentage of households that own stock, like you definitely see in the 10 years of like Robinhood's existence, you said like stepping up pretty meaningfully. And I do think some of this stuff is these micro investors is a big part of that. But yeah, it goes back to when I've seen this similar this is similar. You can, whilst I think that is an important part of it, you can still make that mechanism work for you. And we've certainly seen it work in other companies where you're using that kind of idea of like, how do I take a single dollar and like maximize the perceived value of that dollar to the consumer? Because if you do it the right way, you can take a dollar and make it feel like 10. And I think that's what Robinhood did a really good job of.
yeah, and other brands also kind of use soft rewards in the sense that it has a material value to the end consumer, but costs the actual brand less.
Yes.
So if you are a mobile phone operator, giving away
Right.
data doesn't really cost you very much at all, to be honest, but actually has more value to the end consumer. So it's always worth thinking, what do we have that costs us less than
100%. I
costs
mean, one
more?
of the most interesting like dynamic like products that I've seen on that front is when I worked. I don't know how much of your audience is sort of US versus UK based, but so I worked for a company called Credit Karma over in the US with about 100. We have about I think 120 million users in the US or globally. And it's a sort of way of getting your credit score, which is integral in the US to like getting financial services products. And while I was there, we launched a tax filing product, which again, pretty alien to most of the world, but in the US, everyone has to file their taxes once a year. It's tax filing season right now. So if you watch the NFL over here, it's all sponsored by TurboTax. And one of the interesting things there was what we found was there's a product called Audit Defense, right? Which TurboTax sells and Credit Karma offered, which is again this idea of like if you ever get audited by the IRS, like we'll provide these companies will provide you with an accountant and a lawyer to sort of help you help you sort of fight that. And again, I think the cost of that to the companies is somewhere in the region of $1 or $2, because it's a very unlikely outcome that anyone will ever get audited, particularly if you're doing your own taxes on a like software, right? Like generally that means you're a pretty like standard filer, but the value of that, the perceived value of that to a consumer is like 30, 40, $50. They're like, well, I really want that. Like everyone's afraid of getting audited. And so again, you can take these products like that cost you very little. I mean, mobile phone insurance, I've seen that used a lot as well, where it's like a couple bucks, but people worry about losing their phone. And so you can provide these benefits that I think are really worth a lot more to somebody in terms of their perceived value than they actually cost. And so if you find those little pockets, offering those can be a really nice way of like juicing up a referral program.
So the other super smart thing, and I don't think they were the first, but probably the biggest and the best thing that Robinhood did was the waitlist right at the beginning. So it was referral in two senses, right? Because even before it existed, there was a referral program to get on the waitlist. And the smart thing was, the more people you referred, the higher you climbed up that waitlist too. So you probably got the numbers more in your head than I have, but it was 1 million people were registered by the time the company or the app actually went live in the end, which is remarkable. And all through word of mouth, all through referral.
Yeah, and it's still a tool they use, or the company uses pretty effectively. And we had a credit card that we launched I want to say last like sort of like March, April, so about a year ago, and that we managed to get over 2 million people on that wait list. Retirement product that we launched the year before, and it was sort of saying 2 to 3 million people on the wait list. And some of those you continue to like use that that sort of the move up the list. One of the things actually we did with the card was we offered people, it was what we call the Robinhood Gold Card. And the Robinhood Gold Card is, it's I don't know if you've seen it or heard of it. It offers basically 3% cash back on everything. This was a great card. I used it all the time, and lots of cool, funky features. But one of the, it's a stainless steel kind of gold colored card. But one of the things that we cottoned onto quite early on was that if we produce a pure gold variant of the card, it has this like implied value that people can't quite help themselves with. Like, so we ended up offering, if you got I think it was 10 people referred onto our gold product. So it's a subscription product that you need before you can take the gold thing. So if you get 10 people on the gold card, on the gold product, or 10 referrals that take the gold subscription, you would get a pure gold, like 14 karat gold version of the card. And so I think that was a really interesting way of thinking about like how do you kind of get people not just to think about this as like monetary value, but beyond that. You certainly saw like people crusading out there, like desperately trying to get all of their friends and family to like sign up, because this was the only way to get this pure gold credit card, and they just really wanted it. And I think that was something that we saw work really well as well.
Yeah, I've seen some of like the unboxing videos for those, and they've got to pay for themselves in the earned exposure.
I mean, I think the benefit of like any time on the referral side, you sort of set a cap at like 10. It's really hard to get. I don't know about you. I don't know if I definitely have 10 friends that I can convince to do anything. Like even turn up on time to a dinner. So never mind like actually getting to take a product. So like, I think anytime you set that threshold, I think Acorns, I don't know if you follow them in the fintech space, they do a really good job of this, but they'll be like, hey, like get 7 people and we'll give you $987. And you get a ton, like from a referral perspective, again, like people are looking at that $987 and thinking, well, I can get a massive amount of money, a relatively large amount of money. But obviously, if they refer 3 people, which is probably more likely the average that they're going to be able to get if they like try hard, it's going to be 2, 3, 4, then you don't pay out the reward, or you don't pay out the accelerated reward. And so I think in that scenario, you can create, again, this idea, this perceived value of money, and the average, it might still only cost you $5 or $10 per referral, up to 10, and then $1,000 for the 10th. but the consumer sees it as $1,000 for like $100 each, and where you're actually paying out like 5 or 10. And so again, it goes back to sort of how can you
Yep.
juice that up? I think that's the gold card was a good example of being able to get a lot of that activity going for people that were trying to get to the 10 and like benefiting from that. But yeah, on the other side of it, the unboxing, like the prep, all that. So like Sam Altman got one, which was, and he like posted about it. I think that's more a case though of like just incredible product, right? Like, that was just the product
Right.
team, CEO just had a passion for that and just like kind of knew that it would catch fire. But and so that creates that kind of like that demand and that conversation.
It's sort of self-fulfilling as well, because the idea is if people get to 10, they inherently are quite influential people with
Yes.
quite big
Yeah.
networks, right? Because you're not going to get 10 people to take out this product if you're a guy who lives by himself and never goes
Right.
out and has no friends. So you can almost bank on the fact that when these people get these cards, they're going to get you a whole bunch of exposure by telling
Yeah.
people about it then.
Yeah.
So really
Yeah.
super,
And it
super
goes back
smart.
to as well, I think one of the things that we'd seen early on, and this is not just true of Robinhood, it's true of everyone, but I think Robinhood in particular has a slightly different kind of monetization mechanism, in the sense that there's a lot of you can invest a lot of money, right? So there's not a lot of cap on like what the sort of super user looks like in terms of revenue. But what you do see in referrals as well, if you like look into it, is that high value users refer high value users. It's a network effect, and
Right.
so whenever you're thinking about building a referral campaign and understanding that, like, yes, on average, you might be acquiring users that are worth $20 and you're going to pay $10. That's just, but in fact, like the $100 users are going to refer $100 users and the $5 users are going to refer $5. You have to, if you can think about mechanisms and that engage that. And obviously to your point, like the gold card was a really good way of sort of, okay, this is kind of high end. The people that are interested in this are like, tend to be higher end users. They're going to refer more of their higher end users. They're going to create, often they have audiences. I mean, this was
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we found with that product was that a lot of influencers wanted it and were chatting about it because, they like having, for no other reason than they like having the unboxing video and talking about like something that they have that no one else has because it creates content. So you really got people like driving their networks, and their networks were quality networks. So it's an interesting way of thinking about the world.
Did you? It's interesting talking about the kind of high worth customers. Did you ever consider having different referral programs for different types of
Yeah, I
customers
think I
with
think
different
I
rewards?
think testing that out, and again, not just at Robinhood, but I think that's true everywhere. Like, if you know somebody is a high value customer, giving them a higher value reward, absolutely, like works really well. If you've got if your generic kind of entrance point is $5, like, once somebody's shown you that they're like a top 5% customer, giving them like a 5x reward, like, it can be hard to administer, but you obviously have to do it in like tailored offers, in app, email, etc. But once you can do that, you do see they respond better to that. They tend, what you also find with like higher value users is they tend not to respond well to like the generic as well necessarily to the generic offer. Again, particularly Robinhood, where it's an investment product. So like your high value users maybe have hundreds of thousands of dollars on the platform. They are operating at a different economic scale to, like, to your point, like the people who are coming in and
Yeah.
their $5, stock is the first stock they've ever owned. It's like a different dynamic. And so you have to kind of look at that. And so if you have a lot of variance in your user base, I think having, being willing and able to pay a high value user 5 or 10 times what you would pay just generically is really helpful because it helps engage them. It also makes them feel better, right? One of the things that I've found is, like, in that scenario, anytime you can tell your customer that they're special to you and you give them something that makes them feel, that you care about them a little more, or recognize like how much business that they do with you, I think that always helps. And so, you also, I don't know that I've dug into the data on it, but like, I'm sure that there's retention impacts of offering high quality users like high quality rewards, because they just feel appreciated, and that's something you should always be looking to do with those types of customers. I think when businesses scale, you lose some of that a little bit, like, some of the kind of some of the kind of customer centricity that you have when you're growing and you're a growth stage company. You can use that when you get bigger and you're just looking at things on a spreadsheet. And so I think that's part of the challenge. I also think the other part of it can be, again, having been at Wise and Robinhood, like I've been at these companies that have gone through the scale process and like become mega, like really large. It's really hard to understand the incrementality of this stuff. Like it's quite easy when you're, when it's early stage, you just see these spikes when you do things, or you see people talking about it. But when you get to like 20 million users, when you get to, billions of dollars of revenue, it's really, really hard to understand the incrementality of anything that you're doing. And so it often becomes a case of, and even Robinhood, like separating out offers, right? So, because people will share them. They'll be like, oh, I got this, Robinhood sent me this offer. And then other people get annoyed about it. So you always think about the cost of doing this stuff, but I think it's still really important to try and do it, because you can launch an offer and suddenly there's a bunch of someone influential posts about it on X, and you're dealing with like customer service people, like inquiries with people trying to get the same offer. So all of that stuff can make it hard to like test and learn and experiment and drive here, but I think it's still really important to do. Yeah. But the incrementality is probably the hardest part with referrals. It's just sort of like really truly understanding how much of this is truly incremental like recommendations versus how much of this is just like taking a word of mouth recommendation that would have happened anyway and like applying a cost to it. And some of that stuff can get in your way as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating as well. I just did a big research piece where we spoke to people all around the major kind of territories for referrals, so France, Spain, the UK, Canada, US, and asked them exactly that. Asked them dozens of questions pertaining to the incrementality. Would you have purchased this anyway? Had you thought of this brand? And it's fascinating. The numbers are actually incredibly compelling, but proving it is always a challenge. I always think with referral, it's a little easier, even without doing the kind of research that we did. It's a little easier than other channels because there is.
I think it's too easy is actually what I would say, and so I think when you think about attribution, quite often I think the channels where it's easiest to apply attribution will get too much credit, and I think referrals is actually one of those where, in all honesty, like it gets too much credit, because you do get a lot of people that, I don't know about you, but even now I'm like, if I hear about a product I like, I'll probably like Google it to see if there's a referral code out there or like I'll look on Twitter or whatever and just see like, oh, there's a referral. So to get maybe juice that initial like purchase, and so I think that tends to happen a lot. And so I think referrals is something where you if you're not careful, you're more likely to over attribute than under attribute. And whereas I think other channels, that's to some degree more or less true. I think obviously.
Yeah, I think that's the case with discounting or anything like that. But what I will say, of course you're right, but what I will say about that is if you can't find a referral code because the company doesn't have a referral program, but the competitor does,
you might lose that sale. That's the challenge of being like, of like having there is definitely a percentage of sales that you will lose. And so then, it's the age-old question of like, how much do you bid against your own brand term on Google, right? Like it's, there's no doubt that like other people are going to steal your organic traffic and your organic acquisition if you don't do it. But what is the incrementality of what you're paying? So I think referrals live in that same world, 100%. There is always going to be, you're going to, if you don't have a referral program, you're going to lose to competitors that do. And the only company I worked at, as I said, Credit Karma for like 5 years. We never had a referral program. We looked at like standing it up time and time again, but Never got around to it. So it's probably, if I take some time, like sit down and think about it, there's probably some learning to have there. But I do think I do think it can be. It's something you need to be thoughtful about when you're thinking about like the cost per acquisition and all that sort of stuff that you're driving through referrals.
I mean, if nothing else, it gives you a feel-good feeling that your dollars have not gone straight to Google and Facebook, but at
Yes,
least they've gone to
yes, that's. I
customers,
mean,
right?
I think that's
So,
again, like
yeah,
I think the benefit of it. I think you made a really important point with I can get caught up a little bit in the econometric model of it all, but I think the idea that you're like getting somebody to use your product and getting their first stock with Robinhood, an emotional connection that you're connecting with someone, and I think that's something that's powerful, and it's something that is different about this as an acquisition channel. So.
so throughout your career, I guess you primarily focused on the marketing side of things. Is it getting harder and harder
Yes.
for you? Have you found? Yeah,
I mean, in a way, it's getting easier, right? Like, I think that, well, I mean, marketing is not, I wouldn't say marketing is getting harder or easier. I think what you had, as an industry is we had this kind of like trend, like shift from, I've been doing this for 25 years. So you had this shift from like art to science, I would say,
yeah,
in the early 2000s, like 2010s, where you suddenly could start attributing so much better. And then, we've had iOS 14.5 coming in, and all of the changes to like cookie tracking that coming in, all of that stuff has made it then harder to be a science, like to get the science to work. And so you're now in a more balanced world where I think it's a little bit of half and half.
okay,
So it depends where you come at it. If you're like a performance marketer, data driven performance marketer, your job has got a lot harder in the last 5 years, 3 years.
right,
I think of myself as like a full stack marketer. I do like, I have to do everything from like, referral campaigns and sort of, Google SEM. I have to run everything from that to like, events and stunts and,
yeah,
brand sponsorships. So some of that stuff has become a little, I think it's opened the door to some of that in a way and made it a little easier for that stuff to get credit, because I think you lack the kind of like stamp on everything that with the level of certainty that you used to have, that like this person's coming in through referrals or Facebook or Google. And so it creates a little bit more room for some of those other channels. So I don't know that it's got harder in a macro sense. I think it's performance and growth marketing has become a little harder because it's harder to prove what you're doing. And there's an expectation that's been set. Like most of the CEOs I work with still think the world is like 2020 and you can prove every dollar in performance. And so
okay.
it can be kind of hard to go back to them and be like, we don't have the same level of certainty on it. So I think that's changed and made things a little harder.
Yeah, I think once upon a time channels worked for you, and now they tend to work against you. You almost get the feeling that brands are fighting the behemoths who actually want to stop you getting your messages out to people, rather than, you don't have to go back very far, but channels essentially were owned by people that had communities of users, readers,
Yeah.
listeners, viewers, whatever, who would have been interested in products. And there was a kind of a mutually beneficial idea that an advert in a magazine was actually a good thing for the readers of that magazine because they wanted to see pictures of that cigarette.
Yeah.
you know, and it all made sense, right? Everything was, symbiotic in that way. Whereas it's kind of not the case now. The most obvious example being, the AI stuff at the top of a Google search results, where Google now wants to stop people getting to your webpage, which is peculiar because that's what they always were before. So in that sense, things do get harder and harder and
Yeah.
harder. Which is, a lot of the things that we find ourselves thinking about. Referral is just one, but actually almost going back to the old idea of finding sympathetic communities and engaging them. And that might be through partnerships or it might be through referral, but what is between you and your potential customer?
Yeah. I mean,
And,
I think,
and can you get a relationship with them?
I think it's become more challenging to reach people.
Yeah.
I think SEO is on its way out.
Yeah.
That might change. I'm sure I think now it's sort of AIO. I don't know, right? Like you're trying to get the LLMs to pick up on the rights on your CI. That is somewhere beyond my capabilities to like really get my head around at the moment. But that certainly seems like that's moving away. I think one of the challenges we have over here in the US in particular is like, if you're going after a wealthier customer, it's not so much of a problem if your customer, when I was at Dave or Credit Karma, like our customers tended to be a little bit more subprime, in which, so a little bit like lower income. Whereas at Robinhood and Wise, you're talking about people that move around the world, people that are investing stocks, higher income. And that creates quite a meaningful challenge for you in the new world where you can pay for the you can basically say, hey, I'm gonna buy, I'm gonna have the ad-free version of X. I'm gonna have the ad-free version of Netflix. I'm gonna have the ad-free version of Hulu. I'm gonna have the ad-free version of YouTube TV or whatever. It makes it really hard to get through to some of these users. And so again, I think that can create your point. In that scenario, communities or influencers like partnerships become more important at that like higher end price point than it has done historically. And also more untargeted stuff, sometimes just the economics of it work really well, like radio at $2 $2 CPMs can sometimes work better, just because if you want to get hyper targeted, there's not always the inventory there anyway. So
Yep.
I think that is a big challenge that I only see getting more acute if you're targeting the more premium customer, because they have more choices to like tune out advertising. And I think that goes back to like marketing has become a science. I think the art of marketing lost a little bit of its quality in the last 10 years. And so people decided they didn't want shitty, drop shipping ads on
Yeah.
on all these, and so in a way we're the victims of our own successful community, right? Because I think there was a time when I think there was a little bit more appreciation for the quality of the ads that you were seeing. I think print ads often were pretty beautiful to draw the eye. I think that's gone away, and so now people just want to tune it out because it isn't as useful to them.
Yeah, it's true. And if influencers hadn't been so naff about the way they sold products, people wouldn't hate influencers for selling products all the time,
Yeah.
But I'm sure, it'll come around. We'll get another wave of, great creative people that can come up with good ways to actually engage people, because that's ultimately the job.
I think that's right. I think like the brands that are doing really well. I mean, I think that you'll see the kind of it'll come back around. We're probably in a cycle of moving a little bit towards quality and moving a little bit towards sort of creating marketing that creates conversation, rather than just like marketing that is just trying to drive you to like click on something that you're ultimately disappointed with. So I think it's shifting a bit. I don't know, it'll ever like fully rotate back, but yeah, it's interesting. And as a full stack marketer, it's kind of like I think I prefer. I think certainly for me, like as somebody that's like, I would say I'm as comfortable like having a conversation with a data analyst as I am with a brand strategist. It's great to be able to like use, flex between those two different types of muscles, depending on the opportunity that's there for you. When we're at Robinhood, one of the things that we got really working for us was sort of, we started to do was brand sponsorship, like MBA partnerships. And again, we were able to measure it and get those going, but you just started to see like the money rotate out and move into other areas, and you could be a smart buyer in a kind of dumb money world. And that's always an interesting opportunity for somebody that can see both sides of it.
Fintech is highly regulated, right? Were there, specific channels? I was having a look through the T's and C's of the Robinhood program, and there's one I've never seen before, which is you've got to agree not to text any of your contacts in Washington State. And I'm like, damn, that's specific.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
You have to be aware of every law in every state, and it can, I guess, make things like this actually really harder than.
When I launched, when I was like part of the team helping to launch Wise in the US, the kind of comparison changed a little bit. This was pre-Brexit, but the comparison I had was like, okay, in Europe, you have one license to operate in 28 countries, and in the US, you need
Yeah.
50 licenses to operate in one country. So
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. Like in a lot of cases, you're looking at different regulation in different states. Like if you operate in, Texas or Florida, like you can have different regulation to like New York, California, and I think that's something you just have to factor in to how you're operating. So sometimes it's just a case of saying like you can't offer certain programs in certain states, or you can't, or you have to sort of, keep the bar at the threshold that's meets the legal requirements of all states and things like that. So it is much more complex over here, and that's just a good example of like that's a rule for that particular state. So you have to sort of map like either solve for that in the terms and conditions or solve for that in the product.
I thought it was so interesting though that it's only texting. Uh, you can tell your friends in Washington State through any other channel, but it's specifically SMS. And
Yeah,
it's
I
like,
mean, it's probably just I don't know specifically about that, but it would just be like people
yeah,
have been it's like part of some kind of like initiative to reduce spamming, like text
yeah,
spamming, and so referrals has got caught up in that. Which if you
yeah,
abuse it, it probably should, right? And so I think that's a good
right.
example of how these mechanisms can be complex to set up. Which is why I think often I think most companies try and set these things up independently, but it can be helpful to work with somebody that's sort of, certainly on the MarTech side. I think the way I always look at it is like, Robinhood, Credit Karma, Dave, whatever. Like our job is not to be MarTech experts, and it's very, it's usually pretty easy to get like a referral system set up or an email system set up. It's really hard to get it maintained for all of like and uphold for all of these like developments of law and stuff. So it's useful to work with a partner that has to like solve that independently for all of their clients, rather than having a knock on the door of your head of engineering and be like, hey, we've got to make this we've got to make this tweak just to like solve for like Washington State
Right.
referral
I mean,
programs. So
yeah, far be it for me to blow our trumpet, but that is sort of that's
yeah,
where we come in at Buyapowa. That's the point of outsourcing things, right?
right.
Because you're absolutely right. People spend a huge amount of money developing an in-house referral program, and then the techs move on to the next project, and they should move on to the next project.
Yeah.
But then GDPR comes in, and you find that Airbnb is not complying with that law.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Right?
I've never understood. It's one thing I don't understand is that every company I've worked at in the tech space wants to build its own martech stack. Like if I'm like, oh, I want to build versus buy. You always have that discussion when you're like looking at any new product. And part of this is because I'm not like a technologist,
Sure.
and I'm possibly a little bit more pragmatic in my mindset than anything else. But yeah, you always end up with, I think, again, I've been at companies with great engineering teams. Initial reaction is always build. Well, we can build it, we can do it better. And that actually may be true, but what you end up finding is like it's a priority for 3 months, 6 months, and
Yeah.
the maintenance of it is the problem. So you build a
Mm-hmm.
stack and then it just sort of like deteriorates over time because you're not the shiny. When I first got to Robinhood, I managed to like get buy-in to like rebuild the tech
Yeah.
stack for marketing, and it was a big problem. So we were able to solve it, and then it becomes a small problem, and there's a lot of other big problems that you want to throw your engineering resources at, and fixing the UI for marketers on a on your email system or on your like referral system is not gonna get up there with like this new like credit card like product that we want to launch. And so you end up with
No.
the system just like becoming outdated really quickly. So my advice to any marketer, any CMO is like, ultimately buy, don't build. I don't think the long-term benefits of building are not there.
I will let you go, but
Thank you.
before I do, I'll ask you something I love to ask people at the end of these things, which is, and it's really just tell me about something you love. So if you were going to refer people here and now to any product, there is no reward on offer. I cannot give you that. What do you think should have a referral program? What do you think the reward should be?
Interesting. You know what? I mean, I don't know if you can see it behind me. This is a Zwift bike. Do you know Zwift?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a huge Zwift user. Primarily because I have little kids, so I like cycling. I used to play rugby a lot, and so most of my joints don't work properly anymore as a result of that. And so cycling is like a really nice low impact way of exercising for me. But I have little kids, so like, you know, it's hard for me to get out for like 3 hours and go like cycle up cycle around. Even though I literally just have like beautiful national park right next to me here, it's really hard to get out. I have little kids, so I jump on the bike for an hour. I think Zwift came out with I've always been a big Zwift fan, but they came out with the Zwift bike not too long ago. So I think that's a great product that I recommend a lot to people.
Uh-huh.
You know, and I think with Zwift, what they have is the capability. You know, I use it a lot, and you know, I feel like there's a lot of like content unlocks there that I would, give me $100, fine, but like give me access to like a new mountain to climb, or you know, my kids like watching me cycle because there's like dinosaurs and stuff in some of the areas. There's little kind of Easter eggs. So like, give me more Easter eggs for referring people. That is probably like, because I have to spend an hour or two every couple of days on this damn thing. So like, the more you can make my experience better, the better. And obviously that, like, again, giving somebody like that recognition is important. So I think that could be really an interesting way of approaching it. Give me more clients.
Might know those. Right, I think we might know those guys, so we'll get that over to them.
All right,
we'll
send them my way. I've got lots of suggestions as a marketer and a super user.
Amazing. Look, thank you so much. It's a pleasure speaking to you. You've done amazing work. I'm sure you're going to continue to do amazing work. Let us know all of the things that you do. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. All right, awesome to chat. I enjoyed it.